Dr. Kennedy-Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to address the two SOPs that the Green Party has put forward in my name, numbers 41 and 42, and I wish to try to explain those and explore them with the House, and respectfully invite the Minister to address them and explain his government's reasons, perhaps necessarily for opposing them, because they are put forward with constructive intent. We now, as I think, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned, we are in a committee stage now where we have accepted the underlying purpose of the bill, even though the Green Party opposed it, and so we are constructively seeking to improve the bill. SOP 41 essentially brings forward the sunset date from 2017, I think it is, 31 March 2017 to 30 June 2015, with respect to all three pieces of legislation, and the purpose of that is to ensure that the bill would expire, the Act would expire in advance of the review of the legislation. I have no further explanation for that other than to put it to the committee for its consideration. We think the argument is sufficient to do that for reasons that no doubt are self-evident. If they're not accepted, that will be the will of the committee. But I want to devote more of my time to SOP number 42, which has both essentially a purpose clause, purpose section. We do believe that the omission initially in the omnibus bill of a statement of general purpose was a major shortcoming, and now that it is divided into three bills, we would simply recommend that the statement of purpose be identical in each of those three amendments to those bills. Now the purpose of that, sir, is with a view to trying to get some clarity in it. Now, I listened through the committee hearings, but also to the Minister this afternoon, explaining a view that the bill, or the three bills in their current form are, quote, tolerably clear, which is a good play on words, reflecting some of the committee's, select committee's deliberations. Our response is tolerably clear is not sufficient for legislation, certainly in criminal legislation, and also with equal force in legislation that essentially curtails civil liberties in the name of an expansion of state powers. It is not sufficient to have it tolerably clear. In our humble view, it actually isn't tolerably clear, but even if it were, that's not sufficient threshold. Now, why do we say that? So let us, if I can, here I am still sitting at the feet of the Minister and his governmental colleagues trying to understand the logical thread by which we get to where we are. What has happened in the last 12 months that has logically prompted us all the way through to a stage where we are planting covert surveillance cameras in the bedrooms and bathrooms in the name of some new qualitative development in the last 12 months? That's the question. And if it is sufficient, then the government should have the capacity and the will and the integrity to the people to make that blindingly clear, rigorously, necessarily clear to everybody's satisfaction. We're not convinced that that has occurred yet. So we put a statement of purpose in. If I try to follow that logic that I was talking about, I begin with the Prime Minister's speech of 5 November, and I take out 2 points. One is a game changer to the security of New Zealand, and quote, much of that, I grant you much of that is due to the rapid rise of the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant ISIL. And further he says, should people return to New Zealand, quote, fully radicalised and skilled in fighting, they would represent a significant threat. Now, I recognise there are two components there, full radicalisation and fighting skill. So suppose I said, I've been to the Middle East. I lived there 3 years. I've been there within the last couple of years, including during the beginning, Mr. Chair, Thank you, sir.
Dr. Kennedy Graham.
I've been there, I've returned. I tell you now, I'm not skilled in fighting. I could declare to the House that I am a pacifist. I'm not, but let me declare, hypothetically, I'm a pacifist. I then say that I'm tempted to conclude, having listened to people around New Zealand, that humanity should live under a universal caliphate with strong Sharia law. Sir, am I then fully radicalized? Am I a fully radicalized pacifist? I recognize I would not meet the definition of terrorism, presumably, but I want to know if I am radicalized. If we're going to pass intrusive state power bill, and it rests on the concept of full radicalization, the government owes it to the people to also make clear what, in the New Zealand government's humble view, is full radicalization. But this is the basis of the Prime Minister's speech. We then think, right, on the basis of that, we look to the bill. The bill itself, and the bill was introduced initially by the Minister on 25 November. It's passing strange. Presumably it was introduced in his capacity as Minister in charge of Security Intelligence Service. In its enthusiasm, Hansard has written him up as Minister for Treaty Waitangi negotiations. And there may need to be a correction if that has not occurred yet, because that is somewhat unfortunate Freudian slip. We look to the bill and we find no definition of radicalization and no definition of foreign terrorist fighter and no definition of the other phrase, other violent extremists. We look to the explanatory note for help. And the explanatory note says two things. The provisions of the bill reflect in part New Zealand's international obligation to comply with 2178, which includes concern about people travelling to become foreign terrorist fighters, and urges states to restrict their movements. It says the provisions of the bill reflect in part 2178. So if it is only in part, one would think that with a bill of this magnitude and import, the government would say what the other parts of the reasons were, but it isn't, it's totally silent. So we then look to the other part of the explanatory note, which explains the bill is a response to the rapidly evolving threat of terrorism locally and internationally. And here's the critical statement. It introduces short-term measures allowing the monitoring and investigation of foreign terrorist fighters and other violent extremists and restricts and disrupts their travel. That is the statement of purpose, the nearest thing we have in the bill. It is not defined. That's the statement of purpose. The two concepts are not defined. So the Green Party feels a need to have a statement of purpose with a definition in each of the three bills that would read, the purpose of each bill is threefold. One, meets the obligations of 2178 to combat threats to international peace and security caused by terrorist acts, including those perpetrated by foreign terrorist fighters. That is word for word from Resolution 2178. So the second one ensures that such action by New Zealand remains consistent with its obligations under international human rights law, refugee and humanitarian law. That's there in 2178. It's acknowledged in passing in the explanatory note. It is not in the context of the bill. It's not in the text of the bill. Third one ensures that such action by New Zealand is not associated with any religion, nationality or civilization. Same thing, taken from 2178. And then, so that gives a degree of balance in the bill. You're meeting the obligations under 2178. You are remaining consistent, hopefully, with all our human rights obligations, and you are ensuring that the action does not cut across any actions associated with religion, nationality or civilization. And that's a trifold balance in the bill that is currently lacking. And then subsection 3, defining the foreign terrorist fighter, which is taken verbatim from 2178. And it is a person who travels to a state outside New Zealand for the purpose of perpetrating, planning, preparation, terrorist act, or providing or receiving terrorist training, including an armed conflict. So we seriously recommend that consideration be given to that. Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair, I did say...
Fletcher Tavito.
Thank you, sir.